Hi everyone, Elsie Jensen here. Tonight we are going to make just one of our quick and easy favorites here, spaghetti and meatballs. With a little change up, I'm going to use a slightly different noodle than spaghetti, but looks almost the same. And we'll do kind of a little veggie sauce with our meatballs. So let's start by getting our meatballs made. So I've got 2 pounds of meat, a pound of Italian sausage, and a pound of ground beef. I'm going to use 2 slices of soft bread. Because I make a panade, which is going to be used to kind of hold my meatballs together over using just like breadcrumbs. I think it just works much better. So you're going to put in enough cream to make the bread soggy, but you don't want it to be seeping wet in it. So I kind of just pour it over the bread until it's kind of soaked up like a sponge. On here, just a smidge more. And then I like to use the cream because it makes the meatballs really tender and moist and juicy. And then since I'm using 2 pounds of meat, I use 1 egg per pound of meat. So I'm going to add this to my cream soaked bread. There we go. And then we're going to add in some spices, and then we're going to mix this panade together, and then we'll add in our meat. So because of the Italian sausage, you don't need to add quite as much spices. I just really need to add enough to kind of cover the ground beef. So we're going to add in about a teaspoon of garlic salt. So a good shake. Then we're going to add in about a tablespoon of onion powder. This is going to give it a really nice savory flavor to our meatballs. About a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. There we go. And then about a teaspoon of dried oregano because I just love oregano. And before we mix in our meat, I'm going to take this paste and I'm going to bring it through my hands until it all comes together and mix it up. Then we'll add our meat in. But this is like really important to making the binder for our meatballs. So you want to use soft bread. I always just use this soft sandwich bread that we always have in our house. You don't want to use a bread that's really crusty because that crust won't like disintegrate well. And then you'll have chunks of crust in your meatballs. So just go through until we've got this nice herby paste. And I find when you season up the paste like this, instead of throwing in the spices with the meat, it hydrates the spices and it really allows it to kind of blend in equally. So here we've got our nice paste, and now we're going to add in our meat. So again, I have a pound of ground beef. And then we're going to add in a pound of Italian sausage. And since I buy my Italian sausage in bulk, I just kind of squeezed it out of the casing. But you can use, just plain ground Italian sausage. And I'm using mild. And I'm going to go through and I'm going to work the meats together. And then that as well as that paste and incorporate it. And this is going to be the base for our meatball. And this is like my classic Italian meatball. It is a family favorite. It's delicious. They're never dry. They've got that perfect blend between, the beef and the Italian sausage. I'm not a big fan of straight up just beef meatballs. This gives you just a lovely mixture. I'll turn my water down just a smidge. And once this is all mixed together, then we'll start forming our meatballs. And we're just about there. And again, my technique is literally squeeze. Just squeeze it through. That allows it to really mix up and incorporate to where you're getting a really good mixture. Okay. These are looking good. Okay, it looks like I've got it nice and mixed up. So now I'm going to grab my baking sheet over here. And we're going to roll out these meatballs. So I'm going to take, and I aim for about, I want to say like a ping pong ball sized meatball. Now, you can really go smaller or bigger. Sometimes when I'm feeling, really bougie, I make these really big meatballs because they remind me of this restaurant in Minneapolis called Dinopolis where the meatball is like that big. And sometimes I'll make those, but the bigger your meatball, the longer it's going to take to cook. So I kind of stick with the ping pong ball size because it works really well. It's kind of that perfect cooking time that keeps them juicy. But again, if you want to cook them up faster, but then you got to do more rolling, go small. There we go. And again, just grab a little, give it a little bit of a roll. There's really no way to do this without getting your hands, in there. I've done, so a lot of times, at Christmas time, I make Swedish meatballs. A couple times a year, I'll make them. But normally growing up, when we'd make Swedish meatballs, we'd make like hundreds of them at a time. And they're really small. Like you're supposed to be made really small. And we always had this meatball scoop. It never worked. The meat never came out. And I felt like you worked so hard trying to get this meatball scoop to work that it just was faster to do it with your hands. There we go. But these again make such a great meatball. And people always, I think making homemade meatballs is a lot of work. I think from start to where you're ready to bake them, it only takes like 5-6 minutes to really get it done. It doesn't take that long. And then you roll them out and bake them, and they're just so much better than store-bought ones. And these are a recipe that you can definitely make up, bake them, and then reheat. So they're definitely a prep ahead ones that you can do. Okay, down to our last little base. Then I'll wash my hands. Then we'll drop in our noodles and pop these in the oven. There. And now just make sure you try to get them relatively all the same size, because if you have any meatballs that are a lot bigger or smaller, those will either be undercooked or overcooked. Okay. So we can steal a pinch from some of our big ones to make this last meatball. I don't know if it will work. I always try to get them. There. I'll be close enough. It's a little smaller, but it will work. Okay, let me wash my hands. Get all of that off. I feel like meatballs are one of those things that it really sticks onto you. Okay, I'm going to drop my noodles in. I right now have them on a steady boil at around a 6. I always like to make sure it's coming to a boil at a lower temperature instead of right at nice and high, and then we'll pop these in. So these may look like spaghetti noodles, but they're actually called bucatini. And the cool thing about them is they actually have a little hole in them. So I'm going to open it up, and then I'll show you guys what makes them kind of cool. There. So they're not just a straight up, they're thicker, and they have this teeny tiny hole. I don't know if you guys can see them now, but they've got a really thin hole on it, which will allow them to soak up a little bit more sauce in our pasta. There we go. So I'm going to actually keep them long today. Normally I break my pasta and put them in here, but because these are special, I'm going to take the time to let them boil through. Okay, I'm going to turn up now my water to high because I had it boiling at a medium, but this allows it to keep boiling. Then we're going to just add in a little bit of salt to flavor them up just a little bit. And then let me grab my pasta spoon. That way I can start, and we'll give this a little stir, and slowly they'll start to kind of go under. Most of the time, I just break them so I don't have to do this kind of little stir here. But let's go pop our meatballs in the oven and let them start to cook up. I'm going to cook these on my air fryer setting at 425. so that they kind of cook up pretty quickly. Instead of placing them on my top rack, I'm going to place them a little bit down to the bottom so they don't get quite as much direct heat. And I'm going to set my timer for about 10 minutes because the air fryer is going to allow it to cook pretty fast, which is nice. And then we're going to make like a little cheesy garlic bread to go with them.
You have a question? Where do you find those noodles?
So surprisingly, Target. Now, I will tell you that Target, you wouldn't think to go, not even a super Target, just a regular Target, but in their little pasta aisle, they actually have a good selection of this pasta it's all from like imported from Italy. It's not overpriced, but they have all these crazy pasta shapes, and I really love it because it gives you some cool pasta, but you don't have to go to a specialty store for it. Okay, I've got them all pretty much under the water now. So we'll let those continue. They take between 10 to 12 minutes to cook. I like to cook my pasta to right before al dente because I throw it in the sauce, and that's going to give it a little bit more moisture, and then it will get it to the perfect, cooked. So let's start getting our onion sauteed up for our sauce.
You have a question? What brand is your stainless steel pan?
So these both are All-Clad. So this is the All-Clad 6-quart saute pan. And this is the All-Clad, I want to say it's the 5-quart stock pot or sauce pot. But I love them. I've had both of these for 16 years now. They're tried and true. They've gone with me and have stood the test of time. They were all wedding presents. So I always say, when I find something good that I like, I recommend it. And there are definitely things I like. I'll put them up on my Amazon storefront, where that's where I put most of my cooking stuff that I use in there for everyone to look at if they're interested. But they are great pans. Okay, we're going to mince up our onions nice and small because I want them to really blend into our sauce for this. And that way they'll give you all this great flavor, but you're not going to be like, oh, that's an onion chunk. That's an onion chunk. So we've got our first half done. Now let's get this guy. Now, if your knife is slipping at all on your onion peel, it means you need to sharpen it up. I just sharpened my knife, I think yesterday or whatnot. I sharpen my knives every like 2 to 3 weeks, depending on, what I'm cooking it for. But a sharp knife is your friend in the kitchen. You're more likely to slip with a dull knife and injure yourself than a sharp knife. So keep your knives sharp. You don't have to go out and buy a new knife if it's dull and isn't cutting well. I've had my knife, again, was a wedding present I got from my siblings. So it's going on almost 17 years.
Question. How long do the meatballs cook for?
So right now I have them on the air fryer setting for about 10 minutes. The air fryer setting will allow it to cook up a lot faster. But if you want to do just a regular bake on it at like 400, they take typically at that size around 15 or so minutes. They cook up pretty fast, which is nice about them. If you make them a lot bigger, though, they'll take longer to cook. So it really varies on the size that you make. Okay, we've got our onions chopped up here. Let's add in our olive oil to start sauteing them. I'm going to just do, since I have a good saute pan here, I'm going to do about a tablespoon or maybe a tablespoon and a half. And that is because this is a big saute pan, so I want enough to kind of cover the whole area of the pan, but it doesn't need to be drenched in it. Let's give it a good little stir around. I'm going to give a good toss with my noodles because I don't want any of them to stick to the bottom of my pan. Let's bring our onions in to start to saute. Here we go. And I'm really kind of just sticking with, we'll use my favorite, base, the Rayos marinara. But we're going to add in some zucchini and some peppers to kind of give it more like a veggie ragu to it, a little bit more texture. I prefer, instead of buying, I know at the store you can buy all these spaghetti sauces with all these little add-ins. I find sticks with simplicity, the simple base, and then add your own veggies into it. I think they'll taste better, will be fresher and nicer to it. So we're going to let this kind of saute and cook up. I have it cooking on about a 5 right now. And then let's get our peppers, or my big pepper here. So I've got an orange bell pepper. We're going to kind of de-seed it, de-beard it. I find if you give them a good snap down, you're going to get all those seeds that don't want to come out. And then I find for the top, you don't need to waste it. Just kind of peel off these top parts. And that way you'll just get rid of the little green stem, but you still have lots of good pepper right here to use. Now, with cutting peppers, if you turn them and cut them from the inside out, they are going to cut up much easier and nicer than if you try to cut them from that skin, because sometimes that skin's tougher and it's harder to get a good grip on it. That inside of your pepper has a lot of texture, so just slicing it from the inside is going to give you a better grip, which will allow you to move a little bit faster, give you kind of a cleaner cut. I'm going to dice up my peppers again, nice and small, kind of like my onions, not quite as small as those, but along that same, size. Again, so that you're just not getting a huge piece of, veggie, but more that it will kind of be tender and come with the spaghetti sauce with each and every bite, because the meatballs are the star. And this is an Evie request. She had a soccer game. We just got home from it. And she was like, "Can I have spaghetti and meatballs? My coach says I need to eat pasta for our game tomorrow." And I was like, "We can have spaghetti and meatballs." I don't think, they're as serious that they need to start carb loading at 10, but, to get the sentiment. Before we left for her game this afternoon, she was like, "I have to eat a banana because my coach says if I eat a banana, I won't get cramps playing soccer." And I'm like, "Yeah, 10-year-old, I don't think you're pushing yourself quite as far to get cramps, but let's eat that banana, start those healthy habits now." Okay, let's get this, guys, nice and chopped. And you guys are hiding. And then I'm just going to go over it kind of quick like this to make it smaller. I find this is a great way to do your mincing. So you place your blade, you put your hand on here, and you just rock it up and down over it as you move. And that's going to allow you to kind of chop it up smaller than this. This is not going to give you enough power when you're chopping. So really use your hand as a leverage to kind of chop through it. And if you're intimidated with like cutting up things in the kitchen, practice will make it easier for you. It'll make you more comfortable. It's not difficult, it's not scary, but when you get used to it, you'll get better with it. Okay, let's give our onions a nice stir here. And while we're waiting for that, let's start prepping our throwing my pasta spoon around. Let's prep our bread, our sourdough bread, for our garlic bread. Still, by the feel of them, they still need a little bit longer. Okay. I've got just a teeny little bit of sourdough left, but I said this will be perfect to make some crusty garlic bread. We've got a little bit smaller number tonight because some of my kids are away. So we'll get this, and I'm just going to kind of cut off this little end here, and then we're just going to make just little slices this way. That way we can rub some butter on, sprinkle some garlic, salt, Italian spices, Parmesan cheese, and mozzarella. Super simple. You could also, to jazz up your garlic bread if you want, you could add some pesto, either basil or sun-dried tomato. They all make great options, but simple. Simplicity sometimes works the best. And then we'll lay these out. And this is just a great way to reuse your bread, that you don't have to just have it as bread. We can turn it into something delicious. I'm going to even this one out so it will lay flat, so we can get a good crisp up on it. And then I'm putting my parchment paper down simply so that any cheese that falls to the side won't be stuck on my pan forever. And let's get our Just a smidge of butter on each one. You want to use room temperature here. That way it will spread nicely. And if you use a lot of soft butter and you don't have a butter paddle, definitely got to get one. These things, my kids are always like, where's the butter knife? And it's just some random little butter paddle that my friends who's picked it up for me in Sweden, which has the little Swedish flag because that's where my family comes from. And, we love it. Just spreads so much easier than a butter knife. Okay, let's go grab our meatballs out. But before we do that, let me give this a quick stir. Beautiful. And then we'll check our noodles when we come back because they're going to be just about ready. I can kind of feel it. Okay, so we should have our meatballs done. Now, the best way to check your meatballs to make sure they're done is you're going to give them a little tap. So let me pull this out. And if they're firm and not squishy, they're done. You don't want to cook them so long that they get rock hard or and get a dark crust on them because then you'll have a dry part. Turn off my timer.
Yeah, question. What are the dogs' names?
Loki and Brunhilde. And they have some funny nicknames. So Brunhilde, we adopted her when she was 7. And the way we could have, my husband's plea was, you can have her if you call her Brunhilde. Her nickname is Bruni, but she is Brunhilde Hildegard of the Southern Valkyrie. So she's got a very long, powerful name. And then Loki is my mischief maker. And his nickname is Locarelli, like I think of Greece. And, Lucarelli, he's Locarelli, and he has his own theme song. Locarelli, 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 Locarelli. I know it's Indiana Jones and not that, but it's Locarelli and that. It's his theme song. He sings it all the time. You should watch him. He's hilarious. I'm just going to say, people who talk for their dogs, they say they're smarter, so I must be a genius. Okay, I'm going to add in my peppers right here. Let them saute up for just a second, and then let me test my noodle. Perfect, but they're much thicker than a regular spaghetti, and they have a little tube. You're just going to have to trust me on that. They do. Let's strain them. Since we're using a marinara-based sauce, I'm not going to keep any of my pasta water. There we go. And off. Beautiful. Okay. We'll just let those sit there and cool. You don't need to dress them with oil or anything like that because I'm going to throw them into my sauce. Give this a good stir. But you see how nice and small our peppers and our onions are, that they're actually just going to really blend in with our sauce. Oh, let me grab my spices.
I have a question. When using marinara, why don't you need the pasta water?
Because you don't need it as a thickener. Marinara is already nice and thick, so you don't need to add it in there as an extra thickener. I tend to use my pasta water sauces on like white wine sauces or creamy sauce or anything like that. But with marinara, you've already got reduced tomatoes, so you don't want to add any more liquid. We're going to do a light sprinkle of Italian seasoning on each one of these. I say light, and that one was a little heavier. There we go. And then garlic salt. This is where you want it. We're going to do garlic salt in 2 layers. And my kids love it that way. We'll do the layer that's underneath the cheese, but they love the layer on top of the cheese to give it that extra garlicky, salty one. That's what Evie says is the best. She's like, I love the garlic crunch. We're going to cover it up with a little bit of mozzarella. So just kind of sprinkle it on. Again, we use the parchment paper underneath it so that any of those pieces, you don't have to worry about having to dig them off of scrub them off of your baking sheet.
I have a question. Do you do any Swedish meals during the week?
I occasionally during the year I'll do lots of Swedish, like I'll do Swedish meatballs, and then my favorite thing, I'm gonna stir this real quick, is at Christmas time we do a smorgasbord, which is literally like a big table of food, and it's a multi-course meal, and I make all of the different Swedish foods, and it is crazy because it's like a 5-course meal, and you have to follow lots of rules when you're eating it, and I'm a stickler to it. But we do it, and we have all the crazy stuff like pickled herring and Janssen's potatoes that are made with anchovies, and it's delicious, and I love it. But we do more Swedish desserts and stuff during the year, except my Swedish meatballs. I do make those a couple times a year. Everybody loves them, and they're better than anything bought at the store. We're gonna put on our Parmesan cheese. Again, I love this little like shaved Parmesan cheese. You can get it from Costco because you can just literally lay like a whole flake on there.
Yeah, are you Swedish?
I am Swedish. So I was born here in America, but my mother was born in Sweden. And then they kind of moved to America when she was younger because my grandfather was my muffa. So that's what we call him because muffa means mother's father. And so muffa, he was a nuclear physicist, and he came and he worked at Caltech back in like the 70s, developed like studying, nuclear things. But they lived there, moved here, and then they moved to Germany, and then she moved to England, and then moved back to America. So she settled here, but we have strong history. Never taught me how to speak Swedish, so that was always the sad part. I wish I had some secret language that not very many people knew, but sadly no. She tried with my oldest brother and said it was too hard, and therefore stopped with all of our children. And I was like, well, just because it was hard for him didn't mean it was going to be hard for me. Okay, let's go pop we'll pop those in a minute because they're only going to take like 5 minutes to cook up. And I want to get this kind of going first. Okay, we'll pop those in a minute because they're only going to take like 5 minutes to cook up. And I want to get this kind of going first. Okay, I'm going to grab my spoon. We'll give it a good saute. There. It smells lovely. I'm going to let that cook up for a second here, small, and I'm going to quarter it, and then we'll slice it up nice and thin. You could definitely chop it up even thinner if you wanted a really like more of like a minced ragu, but I find just quartering it does well. You don't want to leave it like in big disc or it's going to be hard to eat, and I even find having it things, so quarter it, and then we'll just do some nice thin slices on here.
Yeah, what meat did you use for the meatballs?
So it's actually a mixture of 2 meats. I used a pound of Italian sausage and a pound of ground beef. And then we made a lovely panade using 2 eggs, 2 slices of bread, cream, and then a bunch of spices. And it makes the best meatballs. I find that half and half mixture gives you the tastiest and the most tender meatball. I find if you go all Italian sausage, then it has too much of that sausage flavor, and all ground beef doesn't have the right flavor either. So the half and half is like where is that happy medium. Okay, let's get these sauteing. Let's pop our, it's not even hot yet. Let's pop these guys in the oven to kind of toast up. And this again is going to be our garlic bread. That will be like this cheesy thing on our sourdough that we had left over. So a great way to refashion, even if it wasn't even a huge bit, but this is going to make me 9 like sourdough garlic toast things. So it's just a great way to reuse it. You don't need to go waste a whole fresh loaf of bread for this. You can always use what you have. And then I'm going to set my timer for about 5 minutes because it will not take very long. And this is on the air fryer setting at 425. When you use the air fryer setting, it cooks it really fast, so just don't forget about it. If your oven doesn't have an air fryer setting, you can use a convection bake, which is very similar.
They're having issues with the mic. If you want to turn it off, turn it back on.
Yes, we'll see how this, hopefully. On. Everything working good now? Hopefully. Okay. Well, I'll try to talk nice and loud and clear. Okay, we've got our onions, our peppers, our garlic, and our zucchini sauteing in here. I'm going to spread it out, and then we are going to add on some spices because I do love the base for our marinara, but I do like to add a little extra pop of flavor. And I keep it really, really simple. Oregano, garlic salt, and Italian spices. So everything has the same kind of flavor profile and brings it together. So we're going to sprinkle about a teaspoon of Italian seasoning over the top of this. I like it over the top. We're not going to mix it in right away because I want that steam to rehydrate those spices, which will really bring out their flavors. We're going to do just a couple shakes of oregano, so like a half a teaspoon. And then just a couple shakes of garlic salt. You don't need a lot because the marinara sauce already has a good amount of flavor. I'll let that hydrate for a second, and I'm going to give it a good stir. And this is just going to help season up the zucchini because zucchini is like a sponge. It really takes on any of the flavor that you're cooking with, which just makes it really lovely. There we go. And let's grab our sauce here. So I'm going to start with one. I don't know if I need the second jar because I do have a big, this is a 28 ouncer. I'm going to open it up. Okay. Let me do my little trick. If you ever have a jar you can't open, I just take it, I flip it over, I stick a butter knife in, and then you just kind of slide it until you pop it, and you should hear like a nice little pop of like, there we go. There, perfect. And then, beautiful. So we've got it like that. We're going to add this in here. And that is, I find, the easiest way to open up a container if you struggle with it, is just to stick your butter knife in there and let that pop that air seal, and then it just slides right open. Here we go. Give it a good stir. I'm going to turn it down nice and low. I don't want it super high because I don't want it to, with marinara sauces, it's nice and thick, and so it will pop if you don't do it. But I think I'm going to use a little bit more.
You have a question? Do you ever make your own sauce?
I do. If I have my garden really, really full of tomatoes, I will make my own sauce with things. But Rayos makes a really great sauce that doesn't have a lot of, it's not sweet, it's not overly spiced. So making your own sauce, while great, this is easier, especially if you're, on a time crunch or whatnot, because to make your own sauce, you really need to let it cook, and, you've got to do a lot of steps. So I find this is a really great, easy, substitute.
And how was the cinnamon roll bread last night?
It was delicious. It's actually all gone. That's how much everybody ate through it. They loved the apple butter that got a really delicious kind of thick paste on it. And it thickened up really nicely, so it spread really well. I actually brought over the leftover like apple butter to my parents who were having like some friends over, and I made them chicken pot pies for lunch today, and they all loved the apple butter. Okay, let's add in our meatballs so they can start to marinate in our sauce. I always try to get them in as soon as possible because leaving them out can lead them to dry, and we don't want them to dry up. We want them to stay nice and juicy. And then we'll add in our noodles.
What heat is the sauce on?
So I have it on really low at a 2. It's like a 2.5, a little over a 2, not quite a 3. Let's get these last ones in, and then we're going to go grab our Let me wash my hands real quick. Okay. Looks like we'll use our cat paw today. Beautiful. You know what? I think I'm going to leave these here for like a minute more because I want a little bit bubblier, and then I'll grab them. You want that kind of little bubble on it. So 1 extra minute. I made the cheese a little thicker. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but I'll grab those in just a second because they will be ready. I have my timer set so I don't forget about it. I used about a half of a jar more of marinara sauce, but I didn't need a whole lot more. And then we're going to cover all of our meatballs, let them drench into this lovely sauce. And now we're going to add in our noodles. Grab my meatball pan here. So here is the Bucatini noodles. So not actually a spaghetti noodle. As you can see, they're much fatter in it, and they're actually tubular. So they have some tube base into it, which I think is going to be delicious for like soaking up that sauce. It will allow it to get sauce inside the noodle as well as on top. I'm going to grab my tongs because they'll be easier. Let me go grab that garlic bread right out of here real quick. Beautiful. So 1 more minute, gave that perfect starting, that bubbliness on it. You know, you got to make sure you get the perfect little bubble on it. Let's toss up our spaghetti, and not our spaghetti, it's technically bucatini. Beautiful. It's a heftier, more, more substantial noodle than spaghetti, but I think it will be fabulous. I always like to change up something a little every time. I'm going to see if my kids will even notice because I've actually never cooked with this noodle before because I first thought I just grabbed a fat spaghetti, but then I realized it wasn't a fat spaghetti. It was a whole different noodle. But for such the sauce, and my trick is I feel like growing up in the 90s, you always had your spaghetti on one thing, your noodles, and your sauce, and then you kept them separate. If you do that, your noodles all stick together and they're not as good. What you want to do is you want to cook them right before an al dente and then toss them in your sauce. That way the next day they'll have soaked up the flavor of the sauce and they will just be perfect. Okay, these are nice and coated. Look at that, beautiful. And then we've got our meatballs here and our things, and we've got it. So let's actually serve up our dinner here because we are done.
You have a question? Are those beef meatballs?
They are half beef, half Italian sausage, which is the key to the perfect meatball. Okay. And I have experimented with different variations of the meatballs. I've even done, a third Italian sausage, a third ground pork, and a third ground beef. But half and half I have found is the best combination. Okay, let's serve up our dinner. Okay, so for dinner tonight, we have bucatini and meatballs. So we've got a big serving of our bucatini, which is actually a fatter spaghetti that has it's a tubular spaghetti, with our gorgeous homemade meatballs made with half of our Italian sausage, half ground beef, and then of course we made a lovely panade using eggs, milk, cream, and spices. And then I'm going to scoop up some of our veggies to put on top here. So we've got our, zucchini, chopped up onions, and peppers. And then we will serve it with our crispy sourdough bread that we covered with mozzarella and Parmesan, garlic, salt, butter. So just a nice, delicious way to reuse the sourdough to make a garlic bread. Well, guys, Thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I try to do live cooking shows every single day, kind of show you what we're making for our family and hopefully teach you guys something along the way. Again, we do upload all of our videos to the link on our page. So if you ever want to recreate any of these recipes at home, you can just go to that link, search for what we made. So we've got bucatini and meatballs with our garlic sourdough toast. And we also have a link to our Amazon storefront. Lots of people asked about what different equipment I used in the kitchen. All of the stuff and gadgets I use in the kitchen, I have on my Amazon storefront. So I have my 6-quart saute pan there from All Clad, as well as my stock pots and Hexblad and all that jazz, if you're interested in what we use. But again, thank you so much for joining us here. Don't forget to like and subscribe.